Back in 1963, I was sitting in my small apartment, looking at a blank wall. I had taped a picture there, a beautiful house overlooking the ocean. Every morning, I'd sit there with my coffee, staring at that picture, feeling every detail of what it would be like to live there. The smell of the salt air, the sound of waves crashing, the feeling of success that came with owning such a place. What's interesting, 5 years later, I was standing in that exact house. Not a similar house, the exact same house from the picture. The universe has a peculiar way of bringing into your life what you consistently focus on. But there's more to this story than just positive thinking. Most people live their lives looking through the rearview mirror. They're so caught up in where they've been that they forget to look at where they're going. But success doesn't work that way. Success demands that you live in the future first, in your mind, in your habits, in your daily actions. I've always found it fascinating how a movie actor prepares for a role. They don't just memorize lines, they become the character. They walk like them, talk like them, think like them. And then something magical happens. They don't have to try to act anymore. They simply are that person. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I say pretend like you've already made it. But let me be clear, this isn't about fake it till you make it. This is about something much more profound. This is about programming your subconscious mind with such clarity and conviction that success becomes inevitable. Everything around us, this building, the chair you're sitting in, the clothes you're wearing, they all existed as thoughts before they became things. Someone had to see them in their mind first. Someone had to pretend they already existed before they could bring them into reality. The same principle applies to your success. The person you want to become already exists in potential. Your job is to step into that reality now, not waiting for some distant future. When you truly understand this principle, it changes everything. How you walk, how you talk, how you handle your finances, how you treat others. You can't just visualize and then sit back waiting for success to fall into your lap. That picture on my wall, it wasn't magic that made it happen. It was the daily disciplines I practiced while holding that vision. It was making decisions as if I were already the success I wanted to become. Successful people make a habit of doing what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. They live their future now in the present moment through their daily choices and actions. And that brings me to something absolutely fascinating about the human mind. Something I discovered years ago that completely changed my perspective on success. Your mind, this incredible computer you carry between your ears, can't actually tell the difference between what you vividly imagine and what's really happening. Isn't that something? I remember reading about the experiments they did with basketball players. They took 3 groups. One practiced free throws physically every day. Another just visualized making perfect shots. And the third did nothing. After 30 days, the group that only visualized improved almost as much as the group that physically practiced. The mind was actually programming the body for success. But you've got to understand something crucial here. It's not just about sitting there daydreaming. I used to know a fellow, bright guy, who spent all his time visualizing success but never took action. Last I heard, he was still sitting in his apartment dreaming. That's not what we're talking about here. What I'm talking about is mental rehearsal with such detail, such precision, that your nervous system actually believes it's happening. When I was broke, I started a peculiar habit. Every morning, I would put on my best suit, sit at my kitchen table, and practice signing checks with large amounts. I would feel the pen in my hand, see the zeros, experience the satisfaction of contributing to causes I believed in. Some people thought I was crazy, but you know what? Within 2 years, I was writing real checks with those same amounts. Your mind doesn't just rehearse the actions, it rehearses the emotions, the confidence, the certainty that comes with success. Ever notice how successful people carry themselves differently? They're not hoping things will work out. They know. That knowing comes from somewhere, and I'm telling you, it comes from this mental rehearsal. Every morning, before you step out into the world, take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Close your eyes and see yourself handling today's challenges with the skill and confidence of someone who's already achieved what you're working toward. If you've got a presentation, see yourself delivering it flawlessly. If you're in sales, see yourself closing deals with ease. If you're building a business, see yourself making decisions with the wisdom of a seasoned entrepreneur. You got to feel it. Feel the confidence, feel the certainty, feel the satisfaction. Your emotions are the language of your subconscious mind. When you combine clear mental pictures with genuine emotion, you're literally programming yourself for success. I knew a woman who used this principle to build $1 million business from scratch. Every morning, she would sit in her car for 10 minutes before entering her small office. In her mind, she wasn't walking into a tiny startup. She was walking into the headquarters of a successful enterprise. She saw the bustling office, heard the phones ringing, felt the energy of a thriving business. Most importantly, she felt the responsibility and confidence of being the leader that business needed. Within 3 years, her mental rehearsal became physical reality. But here's the key. She wasn't just visualizing, she was preparing. She was programming herself to make the decisions and take the actions that would create that reality. And that's really the secret. Mental rehearsal isn't about escaping reality. It's about preparing for the reality you intend to create. It's about programming your mind with such clarity and conviction that your actions naturally align with your vision. When you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. Opportunities you never noticed before suddenly become visible. Solutions to problems appear more readily. Why? Because you've programmed your mind to look for them. If you're planning to drive to a new destination, what's the first thing you do? You picture yourself arriving there. You might look at a map, plan your route. That's mental rehearsal. You're preparing for success. Now imagine applying that same principle to every aspect of your success journey. Let me tell you about an architect I once knew. He taught me something profound about success that changed my entire philosophy. He said, you know what's interesting about my job? I never start with the foundation. I start with the finished building. At first, that seemed backward to me, but then it hit me. That's exactly how success works. Most people approach their future like they're building a house without blueprints. They start laying bricks, hoping somehow it'll turn into their dream home. They work hard, sure. They put in the hours, absolutely. But they're building without a clear picture of the end result. And that's why so many people end up with a life they never intended to build. Discovered after years of study and success. Hope is not a strategy. There's a world of difference between hoping you'll succeed and knowing you'll succeed. And that difference lies in what I call your success architecture, your detailed blueprint for the future you're creating. When you order a custom-made suit, what's the first thing the tailor does? They measure you, right? They get precise measurements because they know that success lies in the details. But here's the interesting part. They're not measuring your current suit. They're measuring for the suit you're going to wear. They're starting with the end in mind. Now, apply that same principle to your life, your business, your relationships. What exactly does success look like for you? I'm not talking about vague notions like I want to be rich or I want to be happy. That's like telling an architect you want a nice house. It's not enough. You need specifications. You need details. I remember when I first started applying this principle, I wrote down exactly what my life would look like 5 years in the future. Not just the big things, the income, the house, the car. I wrote down what time I'd wake up, what my morning routine would look like, what kind of conversations I'd have, who I'd be spending time with, what problems I'd be solving, what contributions I'd be making. The more detailed my blueprint became, the more certain I became about achieving it. Why? Because I wasn't hoping anymore. I was planning. I was designing. I was architecting my future with the same precision that architect uses to design a skyscraper. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think once they have the blueprint, their job is done. Nothing could be further from the truth. That's when the real work begins. You see, your blueprint isn't just a pretty picture of your future. It's a working document that should guide your daily decisions. When I was crafting my own success blueprint, I started asking myself better questions. Instead of, can I afford this? I asked, does this align with where I'm going? Instead of, what do I feel like doing today? I asked, what would the person I'm becoming do today? These questions changed everything. Every successful person I've ever studied had this in common. They could describe their future with crystal clarity. They weren't hoping to get somewhere. They were already there in their minds. They had built such a detailed blueprint that success became inevitable. When you're driving somewhere new, your GPS doesn't start with where you are. It starts with where you want to go. Then it works backward to plot the most efficient route. That's exactly how your success blueprint should work. Start with your destination. Be specific, be detailed, be exact. Then work backward to where you are now. Your blueprint isn't set in stone. Just like an architect might modify plans during construction to account for new information or changing conditions, you need to be willing to adjust your blueprint. And this is important, you never compromise on your core vision. You might change the route, but not the destination. I found that when people truly understand this principle of success architecture, something shifts in their mind. They stop wandering and start building. They stop hoping and start knowing. Because when you have a detailed blueprint of your future and you're willing to work that blueprint every single day, success isn't a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. Remember, every great achievement in human history started with someone daring to draw up detailed plans for something that didn't yet exist. Your future is no different. The question is, how detailed is your blueprint? And that blueprint we just talked about, it's worthless without what I'm about to share with you now. I learned something fascinating about success years ago when I was studying the difference between the people who make it and the people who don't. It's not the big decisions that determine your future. It's what you do every single day. A story about two guys I knew back in my early days. Both started in sales on the same day, same company, same training. One of them was always looking for the big score, the huge deal that would make his year. The other one, he just focused on making 2 extra calls every day. Just 2. Now, most people wouldn't think much of 2 extra calls, but here's the math that changed my perspective forever. 2 extra calls a day. That's 10 extra calls a week, 40 extra calls a month, 480 extra calls a year. In 5 years, that's 2,400 extra opportunities to succeed that his colleague never had. Last I heard, the first guy was still looking for his big break. The second one owns the company now. Success isn't about home runs. It's about singles and doubles day after day. It's about the small disciplines that compound over time. I call these your success rituals, and they're far more powerful than most people realize. Your life right now, every aspect of it, is the compound effect of your daily habits. Your bank account, that's not the result of your last paycheck. It's the accumulated result of your daily money habits over years. Your health, that's not determined by what you ate yesterday. It's the compound effect of every meal choice you've made for the last decade. I remember when I first grasped this principle, I started looking at my daily routines differently. Instead of asking, what do I need to do to be successful? I started asking, who do I need to become? And more importantly, what does that person do every single day? Successful people don't wait until they feel like doing something. They don't wait for motivation. They have disciplines instead of disappointments. They have commitments instead of conveniences. Take reading, for instance, just 10 pages a day. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But that's 650 pages a year. That's about 12 books. In 5 years, that's 60 books. Now, tell me, what problems couldn't you solve with the knowledge from 60 books in your field? What opportunities couldn't you recognize? What decisions wouldn't you make better? But here's where most people miss it. They try to change everything at once. They get excited, they get motivated, and they try to transform their entire life overnight. That's like trying to get in shape by spending 12 hours at the gym. It doesn't work that way. Success is created one small discipline at a time. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I first started my journey, I tried to change everything at once. I was going to wake up at 5 a.m., exercise for an hour, read for 2 hours, make 100 calls, write for an hour. I lasted 3 days. Then I discovered something that changed everything. The power of incremental improvement. Start with one thing, one small discipline that you can do every single day without fail. Master that one thing. Make it as much a part of your daily routine as brushing your teeth. Then, once that's solid, add another. This is how you build success habits that last. These daily disciplines aren't just about the immediate results they produce. They're about who you become in the process. Every time you follow through on a commitment you've made to yourself, you build trust with yourself. Every time you do what needs to be done, especially when you don't feel like it, you strengthen your success character. Remember this, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. The small disciplines you practice consistently are like compound interest for your success. They might not seem like much today, but give them time and they'll create results beyond your wildest expectations. Speaking of daily practices, this brings us to what I consider the 4 unshakable cornerstones that determine where you'll end up in life. You see, after years of studying success and failure, I've noticed that everything, and I mean everything, comes down to these 4 elements. Your mindset is like the foundation of a house. If it's not solid, nothing else matters. Now, I'm not talking about positive thinking. I'm talking about something much more fundamental. Your mindset is your set of beliefs about what's possible, what you deserve, and what you're capable of achieving. I remember meeting a young man years ago who was struggling in his business. He kept saying, "I'm doing everything right, but it's just not working." After talking with him for a while, I discovered something interesting. He had a $50,000 mindset, trying to build $1 million business. His actions were right, but his mindset was holding him back. You see, you'll never outperform your self-image. Never. Your income, your relationships, your success, they will never exceed your self-image. Mindset, it's not fixed. You can cultivate it, develop it, strengthen it. How? Through what you feed your mind every day. The books you read, the audios you listen to, the videos you watch. They're either building your mindset or destroying it. There's no neutral ground here. Mindset without action is just wishful thinking. Your behavior is the physical manifestation of your mindset. It's what you actually do day in and day out. And here's something fascinating I've observed. Successful people have successful habits. It's not that they do extraordinary things. They do ordinary things extraordinarily well. I knew a woman who transformed her entire life by changing one behavior. She started waking up 1 hour earlier. That's it. But in that hour, she worked on herself. She planned her day. She studied her craft. She prepared for success. One simple behavior change, practiced consistently, completely transformed her life. Your environment is either supporting your success or sabotaging it. There's no middle ground. I learned this lesson early in my career when I realized my office was set up for comfort, not for productivity. I had a comfortable chair, a nice view, and lots of distractions. I was creating an environment for average results, and guess what? That's exactly what I was getting. Look around your workspace right now. Is it set up for success or for survival? Is it designed to produce extraordinary results or just to get by? Your environment is constantly speaking to you. constantly influencing your behavior and your mindset. I remember visiting a successful friend's office years ago. The first thing I noticed was his wall of goals. Every major goal he had was displayed where he could see it every day. His desk was clear except for his current most important project. His phone was turned face down. Everything in his environment was intentionally designed to support his success. That taught me something profound about the power of environment. But of all these cornerstones, perhaps the most crucial is your associates, the people you spend time with. You see, I've discovered that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Their habits, their incomes, their attitudes, they're all rubbing off on you, whether you realize it or not. Have you ever noticed how people who spend time together start to talk alike? Use the same phrases, share the same attitudes. That's not an accident. We become what we're exposed to consistently. Your associates are like elevators. They're either taking you up or bringing you down. There's no staying at the same level. I remember when I first started getting serious about success, I had to make some tough decisions about who I spent time with. Some people called me stuck up. Some said I'd changed, and they were right. I had changed. I was no longer willing to let casual associations determine my future. Your mindset influences your behavior. Your behavior shapes your environment. Your environment affects your associates, and your associates impact your mindset. It's a continuous cycle that's either lifting you up or pulling you down. But here's the good news. You have control over all 4. You can choose your mindset, you can change your behavior, you can design your environment, you can select your associates. And when you consciously work on all 4 of these cornerstones, something magical happens. Success becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Remember this? These cornerstones aren't just concepts to understand. They're tools to use. Every day, you're either strengthening these cornerstones or weakening them. There's no standing still. The question is, what are you doing today to build these cornerstones of achievement? I wish someone had told me years ago. There's always going to be a gap between where you are and where you want to be. Always. And that gap, that's not your enemy. That gap is your opportunity. Most people get discouraged when they look at the distance between their current reality and their future vision. They see that gap and think it's too far, it's too hard, it's too much. But successful people, they see that same gap and think, that's my chance to grow. That's my opportunity to become more. A time in my own life when this gap seemed impossible to cross. I was broke, discouraged, and wondering if all this personal development stuff really worked. My reality was a small apartment with borrowed furniture, but my vision was of financial independence and making a difference in people's lives. The gap between those two seemed as wide as the Grand Canyon. But here's what I learned. That gap isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to inspire you. Think about it. If there was no gap, there'd be no growth. If there was no gap, there'd be no opportunity. If there was no gap, there'd be no story worth telling. Something that nobody likes to discuss, the internal conflicts that show up when you're pursuing success. You know what I'm talking about? That little voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" That feeling of being a fraud when you're reaching for something bigger than you've ever achieved before. I remember the first time I had to speak in front of a large audience. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold my notes. My internal voice was screaming, "You're not ready for this. You're going to make a fool of yourself." But here's what I've learned. That voice isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you. It's your old programming trying to keep you safe in your comfort zone. Comfort zones, they're not really comfortable. They're just familiar. And there's a big difference between familiar and comfortable. That internal conflict you feel, that's just your future self wrestling with your past programming. And guess what? Your future self needs to win that wrestling match. Every successful person I've ever studied had obstacles. Every single one. The difference is in how they viewed those obstacles Most people see an obstacle and think, why is this happening to me? Successful people see the same obstacle and think, what is this teaching me? I knew a man who lost everything in a business venture. Everything. Most people would have seen that as the end. He saw it as education. The tuition was expensive, he told me, but the lessons were priceless. 5 years later, he built a business 10 times bigger than the one he lost. Why? Because he didn't just go through his obstacles, he grew through them. Obstacles, they're not in your way. They're on your way. They're not there to stop you. They're there to test you, to see how badly you want what you say you want, to see if you're serious about your dreams or just playing around. Everything you want is on the other side of something you don't want to do. Everything you dream of achieving requires you to become someone you've never been before. And that transformation, it happens in the gap. It happens when you're facing those obstacles. It happens when you're managing those internal conflicts. I remember when I first started understanding this principle, I started keeping what I call a victory journal. Every time I faced an obstacle, instead of getting discouraged, I'd write down what I learned from it. What skills did I develop? What insights did I gain? What strengths did I discover? Over time, I realized something powerful. The bigger the obstacle, the bigger the opportunity for growth. Success isn't about avoiding problems. It's about growing yourself to the point where the problems that used to stop you become the problems that make you stronger. It's about developing yourself to the point where the obstacles that used to discourage you become the obstacles that inspire you. Remember this, the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't your enemy. Those internal conflicts aren't your enemy. Those obstacles aren't your enemy. They're all part of the success process. They're all part of your story. The question is, what story are you going to tell? Now let me give you something practical, something you can use starting today. Because all the knowledge in the world doesn't mean a thing without implementation. I learned this lesson the hard way, and I'm going to save you some time by sharing what really worked. Here's what I call the success implementation formula. It's simple, but don't mistake simple for easy. First, you need to break down your big goals into daily activities. Not weekly, not monthly, daily. You see, success doesn't happen in years. It happens in days. It happens in hours. It happens in minutes. Let me share something that revolutionized my own success journey. I started what I call my power hour, the first hour of every day before the world wakes up, before the phone starts ringing, before the emails start flowing. That hour belongs to my most important goal. Not my most urgent task, my most important goal. There's a big difference. You've got to make it specific. Instead of saying, I'm going to work on my business, you say, I'm going to make 5 client calls. Instead of saying, I'm going to exercise, you say, I'm going to do 30 minutes of specific exercises. Vague goals produce vague results. Specific goals produce specific results. Most people avoid like the plague. Accountability. You know why most New Year's resolutions fail? Because they're private. Nobody knows about them except you. And let me tell you something, we all do better when somebody's watching. It's just human nature. I remember when I first started using what I call an accountability partner. Every Monday morning, we'd share our specific goals for the week. Every Friday afternoon, we'd report our results. No excuses, no stories. My success rate on achieving my goals tripled in the first month. Why? Because I knew somebody was waiting to hear my results. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. That's why you need a tracking system. Something simple, something you'll actually use. I use what I call my success scorecard. Every evening, I take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to score my day in the key areas of my life. Business health, relationships, personal development. Did I move forward or backward? Did I get closer to my goals or further away? It's not complicated, but it's powerful. Because what gets measured gets improved. Here's what fascinates me about measuring progress. It takes the emotion out of success. On days when you feel like you're not making progress, your numbers tell you the truth. On days when you feel like you're on top of the world, your numbers keep you grounded. When you track your activities and measure your results, patterns start emerging. You begin to see what's working and what isn't. You start to understand the connection between your daily actions and your results. That's when success becomes a science instead of a mystery. Let me leave you with this thought about implementation. It's better to have a simple plan that you follow than a sophisticated plan that you don't. Start with these three things: a specific daily activities, accountability, partnerships, and measuring your progress. Master these basics, and you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. Because at the end of the day, success isn't just about knowing what to do. It's about doing what you know. And that's where implementation makes all the difference. Everything we've talked about today, the mental rehearsal, the success architecture, the daily disciplines, the 4 cornerstones, overcoming the gap, and the implementation formula, none of it matters unless you do something with it. Okay, now, today, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who wait for someday and those who make today their someday. Which one are you going to be? Because right now, in this moment, you're making a decision. Whether you realize it or not, you're deciding either to be different or to stay the same. Here's what I want you to do the moment you leave this room. Take out a piece of paper. Write down your future vision. Not what you think is possible, but what you truly desire. Make it so real you can taste it. Then write down one action, just one, that you can take in the next 24 hours that will move you toward that vision. Don't make it complicated. If your goal is financial freedom, maybe it's making those 2 extra calls we talked about. If it's better health, maybe it's taking a 15-minute walk. If it's stronger relationships, maybe it's making that call you've been putting off. Just one action, but take it today. Remember what we discussed about pretending like you've already made it? Start living that way right now. Don't wait until you have the title to act like a leader. Don't wait until you have the money to think like a wealthy person. Don't wait until you have the relationship to act like a caring partner. The future you desire is waiting for you to become the person who can create it. And that person is already inside you. That person comes alive through your daily choices, your daily disciplines, your daily actions. You know, years from now, people are going to ask you how you did it. How did you create such an extraordinary life? And you'll think back to this day when you made the decision to stop waiting and start becoming. When you decided to stop hoping and start knowing. When you chose to stop dreaming about success and start living it.